Hello everyone and welcome to another video. My name is Arahat. In this video, we will be comparing two of the most popular MMOs, specifically the most polar opposite MMOs to each other, showing their differences and similarities and determining which game of the two should you play based off factors like personal preference, playstyle, and each game's mechanics and systems. Now, we're going to start by talking and comparing the new player experience between the two games. Now, if you're someone who hasn't played either of these MMOs, the new player experience will be a huge factor to determine whether the game is good for you or not. In World of Warcraft, you begin by creating your character, choosing between two factions, the Alliance, which are human, Night Elf, Dwarf, Gnome, Draenei, Worgen, and the Pandaren, while the Horde are Orcs, Tauren, Trolls, Undead, Blood Elf, Goblin, and Pandaren. The Pandaren are a neutral race which upon a certain level they can choose which faction to enroll to. There is also the newly introduced Draktyr, which is a new dragon-like race added in the new Dragonflight expansion. Note that we'll only be talking about the base races, not the allied races, since they're not really different than the base races, with the only changes are a bit more customization options. The classes in WoW are diverse and different. Each class feels unique. Classes are the Warrior, the Paladin, the Hunter, the Rogue, the Shaman, the Warlock, the Mage, the Priest, the Monk and the Druid, the recently introduced Evoker, and finally the two hero classes, the Death Knight and the Demon Hunter. Now, after you pick your race and class, you'll choose between two starting zones. The old starting zones, which are basically your own character's racial zone, or the much more linear and streamlined starting island, which were introduced in the Battle for Azeroth. That is, unless you're a Death Knight or Demon Hunter, which have their own dedicated starting zones. Personally, I prefer the old starting zones, but that's probably just nostalgia, since the new one is much better in terms of story, visual fidelity, and the overall linear path it provides. The old one is a bit more confusing and over the top to a new player. In Guild Wars 2, there is no faction warfare, so you start by choosing your race. The races are Char, Human, the Norn, the Asura, and the Sylvari. After choosing your race, of course, you choose your class. Classes in Guild Wars 2 are the Warrior, the Guardian, the Ranger, the Engineer, the Mesmer, the Thief, the Necromancer, the Elementalist, and the Revenant. In Guild Wars 2, your starting zone is determined based on the race you picked. You're immediately thrown into the action with a tutorial that teaches you the basics of the game's mechanics, like the combat, the story, and the heart quests. The leveling experience. In World of Warcraft, there are only two ways to leveling up, whether by questing or doing dungeons. In World of Warcraft, you choose where to level up based on your personal preference. You can either do the usual vanilla questing up until level 60 or level in each expansion zone. For example, once you reach level 10, you can pick to level up in Pandaria from the Mists of Pandaria expansion up until level 20. You can then choose to level up in the Broken Isles from the Legion expansion or Draenor from Warlords of Draenor. In WoW, the questing experience is always fresh and diverse. If you're bored from leveling in one map, you can choose another one, simple as that. The dungeons are also fun and diverse, which is, same as the questing, give you plenty of choices to pick from. Now, in WoW, once you reach level 60, you'll be sent to the Dragon Isles, which are the current expansion zones where you'll level up and participate in the current expansion's challenges and quests. In Guild Wars 2, the leveling is much more different, but not less diverse, and you have more options to leveling up, whether by doing heart quests, dungeons, world events, structured PvP, or even crafting and exploring. After you finish the introductory story mission or the tutorial, you then start at your racial zones, on which you'll be doing heart quests. Heart quests, unlike traditional MMO quests, are activities that you perform in a certain zone that contribute towards the completion of that heart objective. They might involve helping a farmer fend off pests off his farm, assisting in a research about the world's lore, or even dancing for a cow to change her mood. These heart quests encourage you to explore and interact with the world around you. World events, on the other hand, are dynamic events that can occur at any time. These can range from simple tasks, like escorting a caravan, to grand battles against massive world bosses. Participating in these events not only grants you experience, but also rewards you and sometimes even affects the world around you. Structure PvP is another unique way to gain levels in Guild Wars 2. Unlike World of Warcraft, where PvP is often separated from the main leveling experience, in Guild Wars 2 you can earn significant experience by participating in PvP battles, acquiring an item called Tome of Knowledge. Upon clicking on it, you fill up your experience bar to gain a new level. Crafting and exploring in Guild Wars 2 are also viable ways to level up. The game rewards you with experience for almost everything you do, including discovering new areas, viewpoints, and even crafting items. This means that even if you're not a fan of combat, you can still progress in good pace and enjoy the game. Endgame content. When it comes to endgame, both MMOs offer a variety of content, but they approach it differently. In World of Warcraft, the endgame largely revolves around raiding, mythic dungeons, and battlegrounds. There are also daily and weekly guests in the current expansion zones. PvP enthusiasts can participate in arenas and battlegrounds for competitive gameplay. There's always something to chase in WoW, whether it's a rare mount, a prestigious title, or the best gear. However, in WoW's vertical progression system, you have to always do catch-up by chasing after the new gear and equipments, which means if you took a break from the game and a new patch or expansion dropped, you will feel severely left behind with some catch-up to do. You will not be participating in the latest raid or dungeon. You'll not be able to do arenas or be relevant in battlegrounds until you acquire the latest gear. In Guild Wars 2, with its horizontal progression system, you are never left behind, which means once you acquire exotic gear, which you can purchase in the auction house or from doing PvE, you will be always relevant and nearly all the game's features and endgame content will be open for you, whether it's the latest raid, fractal or dungeons, or world versus world content. In Guild Wars 2, you never need to worry about taking a break and playing the game at your own pace. The game respects your time, you can leave for years and return to the game and you'll still be relevant. That is, if you don't forget your class mechanics, which gets us to the next feature comparison, the combat. World of Warcraft's combat system is what you would call a traditional tab targeting system. You select an enemy and then use your abilities, which come with their own cooldowns. Over the years, WoW has evolved this system with more dynamic movements, requiring players to be more aware of their surroundings, especially in high-level dungeons and raids. The skill comes in knowing when to use certain abilities, managing cooldowns, doing macros, and reacting to specific mechanics during boss fights. PvP, on the other hand, is all about anticipating the opponent's moves, choosing the right abilities at the right time, using crowd control for specific classes, and burst damage effectively. Guild Wars 2's combat system is called hybrid combat. While it retains some elements of tab targeting, it blends in action combat elements. You have a dodge mechanic that allows you to evade attacks, and positioning matters a lot. For instance, you can actively aim some skills, and they can either hit or miss based on where the enemy is. As the gear doesn't mean matter at all in PvP, the only determining factor is your skill and class knowledge and muscle memory. The game has less emphasis on cooldown management, but more on combining abilities effectively. Skills can often be combined together for amplified effects, and many abilities change based on the weapon you're wielding. This system often feels more fluid and dynamic, especially in PvP scenarios where dodging, aiming, and chaining skills together can make or break a fight. In conclusion, both World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2 have their unique charm. WoW offers a rich history, diverse mechanics, and tons upon tons of content. Its vertical progression system ensures that there's always something to chase, but it can be daunting for players who don't regularly play and dislike gear treadmills, as people call it. Guild Wars 2, with its horizontal progression, respects the player's time. Its combat is engaging, and there's a genuine sense of freedom in how you choose to level up and approach the endgame. It's a game that allows you to immerse yourself in its world at your own pace. Now, the monetization. World of Warcraft is on a subscription-based model. This means you pay a monthly fee to access the game, although there are occasional free weekends or trials. Additionally, WoW has an in-game store where you can buy cosmetic items, services like server transfers, race changes, or renames. They also sell pets and mounts. While these don't give any significant in-game advantages and are mainly cosmetic features, the mounts in the store usually look prettier than the earnable ones in-game. It's also important to mention the WoW token system, which can be bought with real money and sold in the in-game auction house for gold. Players can thus indirectly purchase in-game gold with real money, or vice versa, purchase their subscription with in-game gold. It's more like a legalized gold selling method, which most players don't really appreciate, especially when it was reintroduced in the classic Wrath of the Lich King servers. Guild Wars 2, on the other hand, uses a buy-to-play model for its core game and expansions. This means you buy the game once and then can play it indefinitely without a subscription. There's also a free-to-play version with some restrictions. The game monetizes through its in-game store, the Gem Store. Here you can buy cosmetics, convenience items, and some account upgrades. The game sure that items sold here are not pay-to-win. You can also exchange in-game gold for gems, the currency used in the Gem Store, which means dedicated players can potentially get items without spending real money. But it also means that the opposite can happen too. While the gear doesn't mean much in the game, players can simply buying gems and converting them to gold, which really affects the overall rare and legendary status of the items, which makes players that dedicated huge chunks of time and efforts reasonably angry. World of Warcraft has a very limited trial, which allows you to go up until level 20. In that trial, you can't really do much. The classes don't really feel fun or polished in level 20. You can't experience much of the game's features or story. You will feel very limited until you purchase the game. Guild Wars 2 takes a different approach, allowing you to experience most of the game's content without issues. Of course, you'll not be able to experience the expansion zones or story like the Crystal Desert or the Maguma maps or raids. However, you can pretty much participate in most of the game's content you like, whether it's PvP or PvE. And with the game's gear scaling system, you are never behind the players who bought the game. However, I highly encourage buying the expansions, since they are so cheap and go on sale often. The expansion's content is much more defined and overall better, with many essential features like the gliders, mounts, and mastery tracks. So, which one should you play? It ultimately boils down to personal preference. If you appreciate a game with deep lore and a bit of that traditional MMO feel, WoW is your pick. And if you want a more modern combat system with a progression that feels less grindy and a game that truly respects your time, Guild Wars 2 might be the game for you. If you liked the video, consider smashing that like button, subscribe for more MMO content, write in the comments section which game do you think is better and why. As always, be safe, keep your spirits high, and have a pleasant day.